Welcome to Taking the High Road, a special show dedicated to the trucking industry, specifically at the confluence of recruiting, retention, and compliance. In the fourth year as the host of this show, I bring over 2 decades of industry experience, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side. And each week I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges. I appreciate all the positive feedback, good or bad, actually. I'm indifferent. Just bring us feedback. We like to hear it. Don't forget to rate and review Taking the Higher Road on your preferred platform. And by the way, if you are watching on YouTube, please go ahead and smash that like button. We like that. So I'd also like to thank and highlight the show's valuable sponsors. Their dedication and commitment to the industry and to the show is greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you're interested in being a sponsor of Taking the Higher Road or joining me for an interview, please email jeremy@takingthehigherroad.com. This week, I'm honored to be joined by an award-winning leader whose focus and passion on retention and the driver experience is making a huge difference. Rachelle Baker, Director of Culture and Driver Services with Canadian-based Searcy Trucking. Great to have you on the show, Rachelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to get into your background, what attracted you to the trucking industry, what it is about culture and the driver experience that forged your passion. We could talk about Searcy Trucking, your impressively low turnover, and what you're doing to continually improve the driver experience there. And since you operate in Canada, I'd love your take on what's happening there. Perhaps you could share some of the advantages as well as challenges that you've been facing the past few years. And then lastly, we'll answer a question from a listener during our deeper dive segment. Does that work for you?
Sounds exciting.
All right. Yeah, for some of us anyway. I start every conversation with a book recommendation. Can you share with the audience maybe a book that you've read or that you're reading that's been impactful for you?
So absolutely. I actually have an example here because I know what you do at the beginning of your shows. So this book is called Testing Positive, 365 Days of Calm Through Chaos, by Sylvia Marusek. She's local to Winnipeg. She actually started writing this, I guess, during chaos of COVID. So the book itself it's quite long, just because the context behind it is to work on overcoming some of that negativity that just kind of seemed to draw us all in to almost every conversation that we were a part of during COVID. And so there's a little ledger with you to coach yourself on turning negative to positive. I have always tried to be a positive person, but during that awful time in our lives, where everything just seemed to have a negativity and seemed to divide us all, I really needed something to help me focus on how to be positive and how to turn things around. So Sylvia is actually a health and safety advocate in Manitoba. She works with companies on their safety plans and just health and safety in general. And she actually spoke at Manitoba Trucking Association event last year that I attended. So yeah, the book was purchased by a few of us in the office, and it's hard to get into that routine, every day, but she did a great job of just kind of keeping it simple and really, accurate information on how to kind of transform your thinking. So yeah, that's one of my favorites right now.
Yeah, I love that. And by the way, that seems to be a theme. I'd say overall, if I look back at the last going on 3+ years of questions, a lot of them are about the mindset and just sort of reframing things or transforming, turning negatives. Again, it's you can't control everything, but what you can control is how you behave or how you respond, how you perceive things, and that sort of thing. And so that's definitely an overarching theme that I'm sure COVID played a role in that, but I just think it's healthy in general.
Absolutely. And I think in trucking, and not saying that this is not happening in any other industry, but especially in trucking during the COVID time when, truckers are essential and, thank you for moving everything, but bathrooms are closed and you can't go here and we're shutting down. And although you're essential, I think that negativity just kind of overtook everybody. Even the most positive person, I think, needed to really work on it and practice it, right? And I think it's a good reminder every day, this industry, on how chaotic it is and how things can quickly turn around. You have a great day and you walk into the office this, Monday morning, and then something happens to alter your mood, right? So it's just trying. And then I feel like too, when you're positive, you can try to spread it around. People tend to try to, take that over. It's one of those things where spreading positivity is not a bad thing because you could get it back in return, right?
It's contagious. And by the way, it's pretty cool that it's written by a fellow Winnipegger.
Yeah, she's doing great, and she's on LinkedIn and all the social media places. So she's great, and she's just this energy that she has. She's overcome cancer. She's got this energy to her that is super infectious. Whenever she speaks, you listen, right? And so I think she did really well with the book.
Well, speaking of energy, I'm curious, who is Rachelle Baker and how did she get her start in the trucking industry?
Well, it's, I think I don't have like a background where, my dad was a trucker or anything like that. And to be honest, I never really knew much about the industry. I had recently had my daughter 12 years ago, and we have a year-long maternity leave in Canada. We're very thankful to have a year off with our littles. And I was kind of looking to go back to work. I was working in a totally different field. And actually, one of my mom's best friends, her daughter worked with Bison Transport, which is inevitably our parent company, one of the biggest in Canada. And she said, there's a position here in driver services. I was like, what the heck is driver services? Like, I had no idea what it was, right? But she said, I think you'd be great for it. It was for a pre-hire onboarding associate. So I was way up north where there's close to polar bears in Manitoba, kind of towards the end of my mat leave on a vacation, ironically. And so I applied and I walked into the beautiful terminal here in Winnipeg that Bison has. And I actually ran into a girlfriend of mine that I hadn't seen since high school. So it had been 10 years at the time almost. And she was working there and she's like, oh, it's a great place to work. And I interviewed and I got the job. So I began my journey 12 years ago at Bison and jumping into trucking, again, not knowing anything about it. They did a great job training. They did a great job teaching you that culture. And if Bison has one thing, they have a great culture. And it's really easy to kind of dive right into that. So I trained there. Pre-hire associate was pretty much like the onboarding aspect. So I got to know the drivers. I was pretty much one of their first contacts when they came in for orientation. And the exciting part about that is that you really are their first point of reference. So you kind of build that relationship with them, especially being in driver services. Like we're there to literally assist the drivers with anything, right? So not directly involved with, logistics and planning and stuff like that. But, I found myself being friends with some of these drivers and having great connections because, you're updating documents and you're, renewing, all of the things that they need to be successful on the road. So that developed into a quick transition into the actual recruiting department, where I would say over about a year or so, I jumped into that. So onboarding directly and, working with advertising and trying to get the word out there that, they're looking for drivers. So that kind of brought me into the industry through our now parent company, Bison Transport.
Well, that's exciting. And by the way, a 1-year maternity leave for all of you listening that are US based. No, you can't just go move to Canada. Okay. but no, that's,
we'll take you.
Yeah. By the way, you may be the first hockey player that I've had on the show. Certainly the first female hockey player.
Let's not go that far though.
Well, I'm not sure if that's what everyone does in Canada. I kind of, I feel like, but how long, just quick question. I do want to get into Searcy Trucking and retention and driver service, but how long, I'm just curious, have you been playing hockey?
So actually, ironically enough, today my Facebook memories showed me 7 years ago, stepping on the ice for the first time in a small town near the town that I live in, just outside of Winnipeg. So I was reminded of that today. I'm now on a different team in another small town close to my town. So yeah, 7 years. I didn't have very much experience. Like my sisters were in hockey growing up in ringette, which I'm not sure if you know of, is a hockey-like stick, but it's just one stick with a little ring, and it's very similar to hockey. But yeah, so I needed to kind of get into something. When you move out to a smaller town, like I did, there's not a ton to do like the city. So and I wanted to kind of get involved. And my husband is a hockey player and played in the States for a couple of years when he was younger. So yeah, I gave it a go, and 7 years later, I still love it. It's, good exercise. I've never really been like a gym rat. So getting out and playing hockey in the wintertime once or twice a week is a really good aerobic exercise.
Yeah,
I'm reminded of that every time I step on the ice.
Yeah, it's not something that I've ever done, and it seems daunting. It seems like it's pretty physical sport, and also quite a bit of strength and cardio, I would think.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, I think most of it was just kind of getting out there and meeting people. And so it's obviously an all-female team from, the surrounding area. And, you have a few beverages in the locker room before, a few beverages after. It's more for the camaraderie than anything. But yeah, the exercise definitely helps. And we're Canadian, so it's kind of in our blood.
Right. Let's talk about Searcy Trucking and your role there. First, can you share with the audience who Searcy Trucking is? You said it was a subsidiary of Bison Transport.
That's right.
Well-known friends at the Truckload Carriers Association, and we see them all the time, every year, several times. But who is Searcy Trucking specifically?
So Searcy Trucking is a open deck carrier right in Winnipeg, and we also have a terminal close to the Canada-US border. We're only about 120 kilometers from the Emerson-Pembina crossing, so we're quite close to the US border, which is really nice. So we're an open deck carrier, primarily machinery. We have a heavy haul division that's in Altona, Manitoba, which is the one that's closer to the border. So we are a cross-border carrier. We have a smaller Canada-only fleet, so it's nice so we can service our customers in Canada and the US. I would say about 70 to 80% of our miles are run throughout the US. So being close to the border is obviously quite convenient for us, and being, the center of Canada is also really good for our operation. So we were purchased by Bison back in 2012, I want to say 2012. But it was established in 1969. So we've been around for almost 55 years. It's a great company. And honestly, when it was purchased, that the opportunity from Bison came when I was approached to see if I would be willing to actually work at both companies and grow Searcy Trucking. I remember at the time, don't quote me on the exact number, but I want to say there was around 60 to 70 drivers, and mostly companies, some owner operators. So when I was approached to move over, I'd actually only lived about 1 kilometer away from Searcy at the time. So I was like, absolutely, I could go home for lunch and it'll be great. So that was the original plan. And then about a month into my journey at Searcy, it was kind of, there was a little bit of a reconfiguration, and they realized that, we need to jump right into this. We want you to stay there. So I really enjoyed the people. I was one of 3 females at the time to walk in the door at Searcy. It was a predominantly male company. So it was a change, but it was kind of a tense time anytime there's like a takeover, especially with a quite a large company like Bison taking over a smaller, family-owned, family-run company like Searcy. So there was some turnover at the time, but I think it was good for the company. I think that my nickname at the time was the Bison Spy. I don't know if I should be saying that or not, but people thought that I was sent to spy on Searcy, but that was not the truth at all. So I was taken under the wing of the operations manager at the time, and because again, Bison is open, or is van and reefer freight, so I didn't really know much about open deck trucking. I didn't know about load securement or anything like that. So they took me on, and they coached me and trained me. So I was a recruiter at the time, trying to grow Searcy at that time. So that was 2014. I came over. So I'm 10 years into my journey at Searcy, and happy to say that we've doubled our numbers since I started, and we're still looking for the qualified owner operators and trying to grow our owner operator fleet. And obviously we have the same struggles as the American side of the business, with driver shortage, but we're doing a really good job. And I'm big on culture, and obviously they put me in charge of it at Searcy. So I wouldn't stay someplace where I didn't feel like culture was important. And it's definitely, one of the big reasons why I stay and at Searcy.
So you mentioned that this is your 10th year, right? And in 2023, you were promoted to Director of Culture and Driver Services. And I think that title sums up what I gather you're most passionate about, as you've shared. But and after knowing each other, through the industry, you and I, and through our LinkedIn network, we finally got to meet in person last year as you flew south for the winter and attended for the first time, I believe, the TCA's annual conference in Orlando. And I'm really glad that we got to meet, and I know you had a great time representing Searcy Trucking there. I'm curious if you can elaborate on what a leadership role of culture and driver services entails.
So again, I was made a manager, I would say probably about 5 years ago, and I do manage a small team. So our driver services department, every company is different, and I feel like some of the smaller companies, not that we're a small company now with almost 200 members, but I feel like there's one person that kind of does everything, and it can be really overwhelming, right? So we kind of started with one safety, risk, compliance, health and safety, recruiter, and then now we're starting to grow a little more. So my department, I have a driver services coordinator. Chloe, she's great. She's in charge of our e-logs and satellite and our fuel program. She's amazing at everything she does. She's very, very smart, and sometimes I'm reminded how smart she is. Then we have a driver services and safety coordinator who's responsible again for the day-to-day driver services, and then our health and safety program. She's great. She's just celebrated her 5 years. Jen, she's been with me for a while now. And then I have the risk and compliance department as well. So Steve, he's the manager of that. So again, everything risk and compliance goes through him. CSA scores and Manitoba carrier profiles, all of that. And then we have our recruiter, Kim. So she's one of the newest to the team. She's been there since August, and she's again amazing. She does such a good job. So the five of us are responsible for the day-to-day, and the culture aspect kind of came on just because, again, with you and I doing what we're doing now, I'm a big advocate for the industry. I never realized I was going to enjoy the industry so much. And then, you fall in love with, the actual aspect of trucking and how important it is. And then, you also take a liking to the drivers that come through and, come and sit down in your chair and want to, talk about their week or, talk about their upcoming time off to Mexico or whatever. It makes you feel like, obviously they're alone for so much part of their day. And when they come back to the office, it was like, wow, this is a good feeling to have, that people want to come and share with you, and not just, and some drivers want to, go home after their trip and they don't want to come into the office and make their rounds. But at the end of the day, I think most of them come in and chat with us. So, you and I doing what we're doing and spreading the word about the industry and talking about some of the important aspects of it, kind of did drive me towards, the communication side of things, the culture side. So, it was developed into my role, not like I wasn't already doing it, but, when you put that in, culture is such an important word. I think that every time, I interview somebody, it's always talked about, right? It's important for most people, that a culture is is strong at a workplace, right? So I'm not saying that we're there yet. We have a lot of things to work on and a lot of things to do, but I think it's constantly evolving, and so I'm pretty decent at making sure I set goals and reach them. So yeah, this is the journey now that I'm on, is just making sure that we have one of the best corporate cultures, especially in Manitoba, if not North America.
Well, I mentioned earlier award winning because you recently received a Searcy Leadership Award. I know that's a big honor and something to certainly be proud of, and you have definitely shared, just in how we've been, talking, and some of the things that you've shared, just how important that is to you. It kind of reminds me, the company I founded, Driverreach, has been working with an Alabama-based carrier, R.E. Garrison, for at least a few years. And I interviewed their director of safety and HR, Tracy Rushing, and I really appreciated what she shared about their mindset, which was she referred to them as a destination employer. And then, which I thought was really neat. I had never heard anyone talk like that before. And then she also mentioned that there are two types of people who work at their company. You have drivers, and then you have those who support drivers. And, I'm kind of getting that same vibe. And I think that's just really cool. I was encouraged by that mindset, and I can't help but, believe it can really transform a company if it's adopted, from the top down.
I think that even our president, and the thing is, seriously, we have a lot of people that are non-drivers that used to be drivers, which I think is really important. And I've never had the privilege of driving, although I wanted to have my own YouTube channel with my girlfriend when I worked at Seiza, and we were going to have like a bikini YouTube channel where we, drove in our bikinis and visited all across North America. But that didn't happen. So now I'm here. And I think that our president would even argue that, he's not the most important person at the company. And that's really something we try to instill, from day one during orientation for non-drivers. Like, everything that we do, the reasons why we have a company for 50, almost 55 years is because of our drivers, right? So they're the VIPs. They're the ones that, keep the lights on, that pay our salaries, that, we can afford, coffee in the coffee maker on Monday morning. It's super important. And I'm not sure if every company feels that way. And I'm lucky enough that I've only worked at two trucking companies, and they both feel that way. So it's easy to kind of, make that established at Searcy. And I would agree with her in the fact that, that's what she says. We want people to come and stay here. You can go to literally right now in Canada, I'm sure it's like that in the US. If you have a class 1, you have some experience under your belt, you could literally be hired, the same day if you walk in or apply online. Like, the driver shortage is real. Experienced drivers and finding drivers that are safe and dedicated to their trade it's hard to come by. So keeping people at Searcy, I know that retention is important for everybody, is obviously part of my position in recruiting and retention. But it's tough, but you really have to work on it, and you really have to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And we try to say that in orientation. Like, if you're not thinking that the driver is the most important person here, then probably isn't the best company for you, because everything we do, you have to put the driver at number one position at Searcy.
Well, and I know that turnover has been low. I mean, I think you've done a really good job there, and perhaps you could share a little bit. I know with just a few minutes that we have left, I'm curious. I still want to make sure, I want to talk about Canada, and I want to make sure that we get into the deeper dive question, but maybe, do you have an example that you can share, something that maybe you've already done to improve Searcy's driver retention, or anything that you're working on going forward?
Yeah, I think that over the years, we're part of many associations. First and foremost, the Manitoba Trucking Association is our primary, and I sit on the board of directors along with our president there. So we get a lot of information from a lot of our peer groups on what they're doing. And, we sit on the TCA, the CTA, the Canadian Trucking Alliance as well. And, when you listen to other people on what they're doing, sometimes it makes a lot of sense. Sometimes it's like, I don't know if we could really do that. But I think one of the most important things that I learned early on was, getting the feedback from the driver. You and I can sit and talk about what we think is the best about Searcy, but until you actually talk to the driver, and not saying that you have to have a long-winded, one-on-one with them every single time, but, we're big on feedback, and we're big on, the president, the vice presidents will always, put their names directly on any sort of communications. Like, they want to know what's happening. They want the drivers to, let them know what their likes and their dislikes are, because again, every driver is different. An owner operator from a company driver, they have different end games, right? So it was important for us to gather feedback and make sure that we were taking that information and actually using it, right? Because there's nothing worse when you're doing a survey and then you put your heart and soul to the survey and then nothing happens.
Crickets.
And nothing changes,
Exactly.
right? So yeah, it's important for us to, involve the fleet managers and the dispatch team in most of the comments and the feedback we get are, related to operations and, sometimes equipment and involving the shop. So it was important for us to make sure that every person that was involved in that survey or that was mentioned in that survey is encouraged to reach out, like, hey, how can we do this? So we do biweekly meetings for recruiting and retention with some of the managers, some of the workers as well. We do a lot of just, huddles on how to improve the experience. And it really, really helps, like I said, that two of our three executives in our president and vice president, they were on the road. They were drivers for years. Norm, our president, was at Transex and Bison for years. So they know how it feels. And I think that makes a difference when they're relatable, and the drivers, I know, appreciate that.
Well, you mentioned being active in CTA as well as Manitoba Trucking Association on the board there. So let's talk about Canada real quick. I assume that there are plenty of similarities with trucking in the United States, but anything that maybe stands out or something, anything that you can share about the environment maybe in the last couple of years?
You know what? You're right. We did see a lot of the same, the increase in rates last year, and now kind of the slippery slope of the rates, over the past 6 months to 8 months here. It seems to kind of hit us a little bit slower than it does. Like, we kind of get the trickle effect, based on it hitting the US immediately. I think that we have a few months to kind of get the full effect of, anything that's happening. So I know for us, being situated where we are right in the middle of Canada, it's a really good hub for freight, and it gives our drivers the opportunity to, they're long haul drivers, majority of them, but it gives them the opportunity when they're coming home to, go and see their family, and then either, take their freight west or east, because we service all across Canada and then all the states as well. So it's important for us kind of where we're located, where we have that flexibility. So if a driver's, going south and doing a little triangle and going, and servicing our customers in the East Coast, they can come right back up through, Manitoba, go home, see their family, kiss their partners, and then, carry on with their freight, the next day or whatnot. So it kind of gives us a little bit of flexibility, I think. The drivers appreciate, obviously, being able to come home. But at the end of the day, we still see the same effects of everything. We're still actively involved in these associations, because I think it's important, especially at the TCA last year. A lot of it was US focused, but I could take a lot of it away as well, and then establish it into our operation in Canada. So I big on making sure that we're always kind of understanding and learning how things are happening south of the border, because it eventually will trickle up anyways to us. But right now, honestly, we have a few new customers. We've got a few awards. It's going pretty well for us. We're excited. I think that sometimes in the beginning of the year, you have that like holiday-itis, when the holidays are done and you're kind of laxing on some motivation. But yeah, our sales team and our executive team have done a really good job of securing some customer freight, and we have a lot of our own direct customer freight, which helps where we are. So those long established relationships that they work hard on, it's definitely helps being up in Canada and still being able to service our US customers.
Well, and I mentioned earlier about the deeper dive segment, which is a good opportunity here where we take a question from one of our listeners. And today's deeper dive question is brought to you by Infiniti Workforce Solutions. And the question is, we spend a lot of money on advertising and marketing for drivers, but not nearly enough emphasis is put on retaining drivers. And as a result, we have a leaky bucket problem. what are some steps we can take to improve retention and stop spending so much on recruiting? Do you have any thoughts there?
That's a great question, actually. You know, we're the amount of emails that I get from agencies, to help hire. There's really no talk about the retention in there. So I think it's really important to, again, listen to what your peer groups are doing. When I first started this journey, I felt like everybody was super secretive. We don't want anybody else to know our pay packages or what we're doing here. And now I feel like it's evolved into like everybody's kind of more industry focused. So if, I hear of something that a company's doing, I was like, that's a really great idea. Just for example, doing like we do a referral bonus. I think that referrals are our biggest source actually of onboarding drivers. I think that when it speaks volumes when a driver, I think our referral rate actually was in the high 60% last year for our drivers. So it speaks volumes when a driver is happy and they want to bring other drivers there. So, with the advertising, we don't advertise a ton for the onboarding. It's about the driver experience, right? Why Searcy when you can go down the street and to one of our competitors and you can go there, right? So I think that learning from what other people are doing is really important. What works for one company might not work for another company. We, as much as we want to have one-on-ones with drivers, we obviously know that's not the case. So we do a lot of, email and, communications via apps and whatnot, just to get feedback from our drivers, because we know we're realistic. We know that, they can't always stop in, especially, Monday to Friday when we're at our desks, 8 to 5 or whatnot. So for us, I think it starts with just making sure that communication line is open. The drivers meet me in orientation. They meet my entire team. They meet everybody in the office, but it's important that they know that they can always reach out to us. And especially in that first month, it seems like when things can go wrong for somebody new, they're going to go wrong on the first trip and it's going to be a dumpster fire. But I think it's really important to make sure that they know that they are going to have to talk to their fleet manager after the trip on how it went, any other training that they can do. I think that a driver sometimes feels like when they're onboarded, it's like, okay, bye, go do your job. They maybe feel like they can't ask the questions after they've started. So for us, it's really important just to make sure that communication line is open, because when it closes, that's not a good thing, because then you never know what they're thinking, right?
Well, thank you so much, my Canadian friend, for joining us today. I love your passion. Certainly appreciate the difference that you're making, not just for Searcy, but in the industry in general.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you finally asked me after being friends with you for 4 years to join the show. It was great.
And thanks for joining me for another episode of Taking the Higher Road. Stay tuned for next episode as I'm joined by Jason Douglas, Director of Recruiting and Retention for Stokes Trucking. And once again, special thanks to the sponsors of the show. We really appreciate you. If you're interested in being a sponsor or joining me for an interview, please email Jeremy at takingthehigherroad.com. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.